Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this another historic debate between Rabbi Shmuley Boteach and Dr. Michael Brown. My name is Greg Haig. I'm the director of the Feinberg Center for Messianic Jewish Studies in Brooklyn, and it's the academic outreach for Chosen People Ministries, and we're celebrating our 125th year this year, reaching out to our friends and colleagues. So today we are going to be having an interesting debate. You heard Daniel Zinn play Hatikva, and that reminds us all that regardless of our differences, and there are many, we are united as we stand against anti-Semitism in all of its forms. Now, unfortunately, those of us who love the Jewish people and want them to know the Jewish Jesus as Messiah have sometimes been considered the enemy. And for centuries, one of the most repeated accusations from the Jewish community against Messianic Judaism is that the New Testament contains blatant anti-Semitic statements. Those who believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah disagree. And tonight's debate is between two of the most famous Jewish personalities in their respective circles of influence. Tonight we'll be hearing vastly different points of view and counterpoints by two men who regard each other as very close friends. And so we anticipate a civil debate, in contrast to what some of the debates we've heard, which is uncharacteristic in our American society today. What do we avoid? We avoid religion and politics, of course. So tonight we've chosen one of the two most volatile topics, religion. But in an effort to present a more appealing approach than normal, our speakers have, as friends, wanted to include a 30-minute conversation as part of this debate. So this will be a little bit different than some of the debates that you've seen in the past. So if you're hoping to see more heat generated than light, may you be sadly disappointed, and may we all be enlightened by these men. Now, something about the rules for tonight. Number one, turn off your cell phones, please. Number two, we'd like to keep the cheering and the applause to a minimum. We are recording, and we don't want any disruptions in that recording. And number three has to do with questions. We want to include all of you, as many as you want, to ask a question. So you've been given a 4x6 card as you walked in, and we'd love for you to write out a clearly thought out question and direct it to either one of our speakers or no one in general, and we'll decide who gets the question. And then we're going to be collecting these questions at different points during the program tonight. And when you write out your question, you can, we'd be glad for you to pass it to the aisles on this side and this side of the middle, and we'll be walking up and down to collect those cards at different points after each presentation. Another thing is that we have a curfew tonight. That is, we need to be out of the building by 10 o'clock, so please observe that if at all possible. Now, the format is very simple. We're going to have a 15-minute presentation by each of our speakers, and then a 7-minute rebuttal, followed by a 3-minute conclusion. And after that, we're going to have that 30-minute conversation between the two of them. We'll be collecting the cards during the speaking earlier, after each one speaks. If you want to just raise the card up in the middle or at the aisles, and we'll have people pick them up. And then also, right after the conversation, we'll have another violin interlude and collect those cards for you. And then the last half hour will be spent with question and answer. And now it's my privilege to introduce the speakers. For those of you who may not be acquainted with them, let me introduce Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. He's one of the world's leading relationship and spirituality experts. His books have been translated into 17 languages, and he lectures and makes TV and radio appearances all over the world. He served as the host of the award-winning national TV show Shalom in the Home on TLC, the Shmuley Show on 77 WABC in New York, the Rabbi Shmuley Show on the Oprah and Friends radio network. He's also the international best-selling author of 23 books, including most recently, Renewal, A Guide to the Values-Filled Life, and 10 Conversations That You Need to Have with Your Children. His book, Kosher Sex, was an international blockbuster. His recent books on the American family, Parenting with Fire, and 10 Conversations You Need to Have with Your Children were both launched on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Rabbi Boteach is also the founder of This World, the Jewish Values Network, a wonderful organization that is seeking to bring Jewish values to mainstream American culture via the media, politics, and the arts. He's been profiled in many of the world's leading publications, including Time Magazine, Newsweek, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Rabbi Shmuley is the recipient of the highly prestigious Preacher of the Year Award from the London Times, and he received the American Jewish Press Association's highest award for excellence in commentary. A highly sought-after television and radio guest, Rabbi Shmuley served as rabbi at Oxford University in England for 11 years. Now, Michael Brown holds a PhD. Dr. Michael Brown holds a PhD in Near Eastern Languages and Literature from New York University, and he has served as a visiting or adjunct professor at several seminaries: Southern Evangelical, Gordon Conwell, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, Fuller Seminary, Denver Seminary, the King's Seminary, and Regent University School of Divinity. He has contributed numerous articles to scholarly publications, including the Oxford Dictionary of Jewish Religion and the Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament. Dr. Brown is the author of more than 35 books, including Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, The Tragic Story of the Church and the Jewish People, which has been translated into more than 12 languages. The highly acclaimed 5-volume series, Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus, as well. He's written commentaries on Jeremiah and Job, and he has several books on revival and Jesus Revolution. His newest books are The Power of Music, Not Afraid of the Antichrist, Jezebel's War with America, subtitled The Plot to Destroy Our Country and What We Can Do to Turn the Tide. He's the host of nationally syndicated radio broadcast, The Line of Fire, as well as TV shows on NRB TV, God TV, Me TV. Dr. Brown brings a message of repentance, revival, and cultural revolution, and he is widely considered to be the world's foremost Messianic Jewish apologist. Just to show you how they've sparred over the years, and it's been many years, at one point, Rabbi Shmuley wrote The Kosher Jesus, and that was followed by Michael Brown's The Real Kosher Jesus. And I think they're going to keep going back and forth for years to come, I'm not sure. But tonight, I hope you'll welcome, first of all, Dr. Brown, who will present a 15-minute speech about the topic, whether or not the New Testament is anti-Semitic.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. Greeting to all those watching online. And Shmuley, wonderful to see you again. Thanks for doing this. I was doing interviews on the streets of New York City today from 16-year-old Orthodox, modern Orthodox teenage girls to committed Christians, and not a single person that I spoke with actually believed that the New Testament was inherently anti-Semitic, which begs the question, how is it that a demented 19-year-old John Ernest, a professing Christian who murders people in a synagogue in Poway, can quote verses from the New Testament in his manifesto? How is it that through the centuries, professing Christians have dehumanized the Jews, demonized the Jews, sought to destroy the Jews, and quoted from the New Testament in the process? It's because, as Gentile Christians, they ignored Paul's warnings in Romans 11 not to become arrogant and not to forget the Jewish roots of their faith. It's because they cast off the teachings of Jesus, who called his followers to bless, not to curse. So the question tonight is the New Testament anti-Semitic? That would be similar to asking, is the Torah anti-Semitic? Or were the Hebrew prophets anti-Semitic? The answer is obviously not. The New Testament is a deeply Jewish book that tells the story of Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah of Israel. It follows on the heels of Moses, Isaiah, the prophets, of Israel, and the polemics it contains are those of an inner Jewish conflict. Sadly, my dear friend Rabbi Shmuley wants to edit the sacred texts of Christians and challenge the foundational message of the New Testament, namely that it presents Jesus as the Messiah of Israel and then the Savior of the world. As reflected in his editorial this week in the Jerusalem Post, he actually thinks that the way to strengthen Jewish-Christian relations is by telling Christians that Matthew and John and Peter and Paul, all of them Jews, were wrong to believe in Jesus. Instead, the way forward, even in the midst of our differences about Jesus, Yeshua, is to put the New Testament back into its first century Jewish context and to understand that Yeshua's Jewish followers recognized him as the Messiah. Once this is done, everything else makes sense. Then, building on this foundation, Jews and Christians can join together as one in denouncing anti-Semitism as utterly unchristian and totally contrary to the spirit of the New Testament. After all, it was Jesus who said that salvation is from the Jews. It was Paul who wrote that the covenant promises still belong to Israel, that the Messiah confirmed, not canceled, the promises, and that even though the Jewish people opposed the gospel, they were, quote, beloved for the sake of their forefathers, for the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. That's why the New Testament begins with the words, the book of the genealogy of Yeshua the Messiah, son of David, son of Abraham. That's why Yeshua is called King of the Jews at his birth and King of the Jews at his death. That's why his first followers were all Jews, and initially they only preached to fellow Jews about his death and resurrection because they didn't understand they were supposed to bring the message to Gentiles. It was such a Jewish message. That's why the eternal city that comes down from heaven in the book of Revelation, the end of the New Testament, is called the New Jerusalem. And over its gates are the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. That's why when Nazi theologians published their own edition of the New Testament called Die Botschaft Gottes, the message of God, they had to excise verse after verse after verse because those verses were too pro-Jewish for these Jew haters. And that's why for centuries, Gentile Christians who read the New Testament literally have been great lovers of the Jewish people. Like the Puritans in 17th century England who wanted to make England a home and a haven for the Jewish people. Or like the many righteous Gentiles who risked or even sacrificed their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust because Jesus, their Savior, was himself a Jew. And that's why for almost 48 years now, as I've gone to country after country, and right here in the United States, the vast majority of evangelicals I meet are fellow Semites. It's not despite the New Testament, it's because of the New Testament. They don't blame the Jews for the death of Jesus. Instead, they quote verses saying God sent his son to die for our sins, and Jesus willingly laid his life down for our sins, and it's our sins that nailed him to the cross. And that's why as I've traveled around the world and talked about the horrible, bloody, brutal, ugly, despicable history of, quote, Christian anti-Semitism, as I've gone around the world more than 200 trips outside the United States, Christians are shocked. They've never heard of it. They say to me, how can you be a Christian and hate the Jews? They say Jesus is Jewish, the New Testament is Jewish, and God loves the Jewish people to this day. I mean, one social media comment this week, I've never understood how someone can claim to be a Christian and hate Jews since Jesus was Jewish. You can't love him and hate his heritage. And when these Christians hear about tonight's debate, they've been saying, what debate? Of course the New Testament is not anti-Semitic. And yet, contrary to Shmuley's claim that these evangelicals are moving away from a literal interpretation of the New Testament, they're famous for their literal reading of the Bible. I mean, they're Christian Zionists. They believe God literally brought the literal people, Jewish people, back to the land of Israel. And that's why Jewish readers through the ages have been shocked when they read the New Testament for themselves. Rabbi Isaac Lichtenstein, Orthodox rabbi in Hungary, 19th century. He despised Christianity, believing that, quote, Christ himself was the plague and curse of the Jews, the origin and promoter of our sorrows and persecutions. With his own eyes, he witnessed so-called Christians committing murderous acts against his people, acts that they committed in the name of Christ. Yet he also read passionate defenses of the Jewish people from other Christians, also in the name of Christ, and they denounced anti-Semitism. So this led him to pick up a copy of the New Testament. He had been given it and hurled it across the room 40 years earlier, and it lay on the floor covered with dust. He picked it up, and he was in for a shock. He wrote this, I had thought the New Testament, remember this is an Orthodox Jewish rabbi in Hungary, I had thought the New Testament to be impure, a source of pride, of selfishness, of hatred, and of the worst kind of violence. But as I opened it, I found myself peculiarly and wonderfully taken possession of. A sudden glory, a light flashed through my soul. I looked for thorns and found roses. I discovered pearls instead of pebbles, instead of hatred, love, instead of vengeance, forgiveness, instead of bondage, freedom, instead of pride, humility, conciliation instead of enmity, instead of death, life, salvation, resurrection, heavenly treasure. And what about the Jewishness of the New Testament? He said, from every line in the New Testament, from every word, the Jewish spirit streamed forth. Now, you might say, oh, that's nice, very nice, very nice. But what about the New Testament telling Jews you're of the father of the devil? What about saying the Jews are of the synagogue of Satan, that the Jews killed Jesus, and that the Jews are guilty of deicide, killing God? To quote Rabbi Shmuley, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells the Jews, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you, Jews, and given to a people that will produce its fruit, the Christians. John takes the metaphor terrifyingly further, calling the Jewish people a fruitless tree waiting to be axed, cut down, and thrown into the fire, quoting Rabbi Shmuley. So, what are we to make of this? Come on, let's be honest. Let's put the cards on the table. So first, some of this is entirely inaccurate. For example, search the New Testament, read it from beginning to end. You'll never find the words, the Jews killed God. First thing. And the verses that Shmuley quoted from the Gospels are actually rebukes of corrupt Jewish leadership in contrast with the Jewish crowds who revered Jesus. And second, most of the polemic in context is simply inner Jewish polemic, including prophetic rebuke for sinful leadership, exactly as we find in the pages of Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible. Catholic professor Urban C. von Waldo said this, that there are almost identical parallels between the language of John's Gospel and the language of the Dead Sea Scrolls, where rival Jewish groups are characterized as, quote, sons of darkness and sons of the pit who are under the dominion of Satan and do his works. In this light, he rightly reminds us that, quote, we must learn to listen to these statements with first century ears, not 20th century ones. For years, Shmuley has rightly urged us to recover the Jewishness of Jesus and the New Testament. But that means that the conflicts and disagreements we read about were largely inside the family, just like conflicts between Satmar and Lubavitch Hasidim here in New York. In years past, when they attacked and condemned each other in the strongest of terms, were they being anti-Semitic? And 2,000 years ago, when the Jewish historian who was writing for the Romans branded the Jewish Sicarii impostors and brigands, slaves, the dregs of society, and the bastard scum of the nation, was he being anti-Semitic? When the Jewish authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls condemned rival Jewish groups, were they being anti-Semitic? Then why is it anti-Semitic when Paul speaks against the Judeans who killed Jesus and persecuted the Jewish apostles? Or when Jesus rebuked hypocritical leaders as snakes or told the non-believing Jewish audience that they were of their father the devil? Why is this anti-Semitic and the other writings are not? It's because we've taken the New Testament out of its first century Jewish context. Put it back in context, and the charge of anti-Semitism disappears. Let's also remember that, according to the New Testament, both Jews and Gentiles who reject Jesus are in some way under the power of Satan. Third, the words of Jesus in the New Testament are identical to the words of the prophets in the Tanakh. It's true that Jesus called some hypocritical Jewish leaders snakes and a brood of vipers. But earlier, Isaiah said of his entire nation, they hatch the eggs of vipers and spin a spider's web. He labeled them sons of a sorceress, offspring of adulterers and prostitutes, a brood of rebels, the offspring of liars. He even said, but your iniquities have separated you from your God. Your sins have hidden his face from you. Your hands are stained with blood. Your fingers were guilt. Your lips have spoken lies. Your tongue mutters wicked things. In the Torah, God calls us stiff-necked as a people. Elsewhere in Isaiah, God commands the prophet to write down for all time that we are a rebellious people. In Ezekiel, the Lord tells the prophet that the Gentile nations will listen to you, but the Jews won't because they're too hard and stubborn. In fact, if I read you 10 rebukes from the prophets and 10 rebukes from Yeshua, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. And that's why Rabbi and Professor Dan Cohen-Sherbach wrote, like the prophets of the Hebrew Bible, Jesus can be seen as the conscience of Israel. In his confrontation with the leaders of the nation, Jesus echoed the words of the prophets by denouncing hypocrisy and injustice. As a prophetic figure, this image of Jesus should be recognizable to all Jews. Then fourth, it's not anti-Semitic to say that Jewish leaders were involved in the death of Jesus. Moses Maimonides wrote about, quote, Jesus of Nazareth, who aspired to be the Messiah and was executed by the court, meaning the Jewish court, otherwise known as the Sanhedrin. This is found in the Talmud as well. So why is it anti-Semitic for the New Testament to say that Jewish leaders rejected Jesus, but not anti-Semitic for rabbinic literature to say the same thing in even harsher terms? Was it anti-Semitic for Jesus, a Torah-observant Jew who is being hailed as Messiah, to say that rejecting him would bring about the destruction of the Second Temple? But it wasn't anti-Semitic when Jeremiah prophesied the destruction of the First Temple for rejecting his words and the words of the prophets? Shmuley takes umbrage at the words of Jesus found in the Gospels, which accuse our leadership of killing prophets in previous generations. Shmuley says that, quote, the Jews are accused of being something like serial killers. But Jesus is just recounting what the prophet said of all and what rabbinic literature sometimes says about our people. So friends, what we have is a double standard in which the Tanakh can indict our people and we accept it, and rabbinic literature can indict our people and we accept it. But when the Jewish New Testament indicts our people, we call it anti-Semitism. Are we sure we're not reading the New Testament in the light of the ugliest parts of church history rather than in its first century Jewish context? Ironically, on a daily basis, online, and we get tens of thousands of comments by the week, ironically, I confront anti-Semites constantly, and they're not quoting the New Testament to me, they're quoting the Talmud to me. And they're saying the Talmud sanctions pedophilia, and the Talmud says that Gentiles are just made to be slaves of Jews, and the Talmud says Jesus is burning an excrement in hell. And I find myself having to deal with the Talmud day and night and telling these anti-Semites, you're taking things out of context, you're twisting, you're misunderstanding. But when I try to do the same thing with the New Testament and say, put it back in its context and rightly understand it, then I'm accused of twisting things. Let us be fair and let us use an even standard throughout. So what do? We recognize the Jewishness of the New Testament, the Jewishness of the message. We recognize, in light of the ugly history of, quote, Christian anti-Semitism, that we must recover a first century Jewish understanding. That means, with the best of Greek scholarship, that many times the Greek word Judaios should be translated as Jewish leader or Judean and not just Jew. Let's make sure that readers today hear things the way readers did in the first century. And then, if, like Rabbi Shmuley, you believe that Christianity is a beautiful religion, realize its beauty comes from this book. And then, even if, in the midst of our conflict, there are intense differences, let's remember that Jesus said to love your enemies, and Paul said to shower kindness on your enemies. So if we follow the spirit of the New Testament, even if someone was our theological opponent, we bless them and not curse them. And then lastly, I hope that Rabbi Shmuley and I tonight can demonstrate that in the midst of intense and fierce theological differences, we stand as one in calling for Jews and Christians to combat anti-Semitism, an ugly, viral disease that must be stopped. Thank you so much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to know I'm the underdog in tonight's debate. All you guys are cheering, Mike. What am I, chopped liver? I mean, come on. Now, what this man here understands is that men with facial hair must always stand together. I have to give one little caveat before I start to speak. Should I require reading glasses tonight? Because Mike and I have now been debating for 400 years, okay? So I've grown a little bit older, and also he's been very mean to me. He's like beat up on me, so many debates. So if I have to rely on these reading glasses, I want you to know that my wife, who brought these, specifically chose reading glasses that would spook Mike and confuse him. These are like psychedelic. My wife either chose these to humiliate me or to confuse Mike, or both. Mike, it's a pleasure to debate again. God bless you, and God bless everyone here in this room. Thank you all for coming. My friends, I hold in my hand the Christian Bible. This is the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, which is a little bit derogatory, as if it's old and discarded, and this is the New Testament. When Mike quotes passages from the prophets who criticize the Jewish people, they are spread liberally throughout the entire width of this large book. When we speak about castigations, condemnations, attacks on the Jews, for example, being the children of Satan, there are 450 in this small book. They average 2 per page. So since we are in the midst of the 9 days, the period of mourning for the destruction of the temple at the hands of the Romans who had gladiatorial combat with 2 men disemboweling each other for sport and entertainment, the Romans who crucified so many people after the Spartacus rebellion that it lined the entire Appian Way, the Romans who crucified 250,000 Jews in ancient Judea, mostly under Pontius Pilate, who was the great mass murderer, the Stalin of the ancient world. Given that we Jews experienced the destruction of our temple at the hands of the Romans, I want to read you a small synopsis of the New Testament. And I want you to tell me, given that there are essentially 2 groups discussed in the New Testament, the Romans, the occupiers, and the Jews who were being occupied, who is this referring to? Who's this referring to? Vipers and poisonous snakes, hard-hearted hypocrites, thieves and robbers, the blind leading the blind, people who reject God's commandments and reject God's purpose, people who plotted on multiple occasions to kill God incarnate in flesh and eventually did, people who said that God's blood should be on them and on their children forever, Matthew 27. People who said that they are filled with yeast and arrogance. People who have no love for God in their hearts. People who don't know Jesus nor his Father. And finally, people who are descendants of their father, the devil. Are we speaking of the Romans or the Jews? Anyone want to guess? Come on, help me here. Are we speaking of the Romans, the ancient occupier, murderous, bloody, brutal Rome, or the Jews? And if I were to tell you that someone would demonize the modern state of Israel and say that Israel, a majestic democracy, Israel with women's rights, Israel with LGBT rights, Israel with freedom of conscience, freedom of worship, freedom of congregation, if I were to tell you that the UN or someone else passed 5,000 resolutions against Israel and said the Palestinians with no freedoms and no women's rights, and Iran stones women to death and threatens to annihilate Israel, and if I told you that Israel's the bad guys, would you say that the UN is fair? Would you say that it's fair? It's not just me who believes that my Christian brothers and sisters, today Israel's foremost allies, and God bless you all who are evangelical Christians who stand up for Israel, it's not just me who believes that there has to be a re-investigation, a reinterpretation, a re-examination of Christian scripture. It's led to terrible consequences. My friend Mike Brown wrote, quote, "Like it or not, Israel's history suggests that judgment has been the norm. In God's sight, it's not just the Adolf Hitlers of the world who are unrighteous. Rather, by his standards, most human beings, including most Jews, are unrighteous." Firstly, the comparison to Hitler is utterly unacceptable. We Jews are a righteous people. We're tired of hearing that we deserve what we get. The Holocaust was not because we don't believe in Jesus. The Holocaust was because humanity and Germany turned to barbarity. But Mike goes on. The Messiah while the Messiah came to bring peace, as a people, we the Jews missed the opportunity to receive him as our king, and we have been suffering the consequences ever since. That is a justification for anti-Semitism. Should we fault Jesus, our righteous prophet and Savior? Or should we fault those of our forefathers who failed to listen to him? That's why this debate matters. Because I believe that Mike does love the Jewish people. But then why is he writing that? You can't continue to excuse the decimation of the Jewish people. Let me prove to you for a quick moment that portions of the New Testament were edited to make the Jews look murderous. In Acts chapter 9, verse 23, the story is told about the Apostle Paul, quote, after many days had passed, the Jews conspired to kill Paul. But Paul, Saul, learned of their plot, and one night his disciples took him and lowered him in a basket through a window in the wall. So who's trying to kill Paul? The murderous Jews. You'll soon discover how many times the Jews are described as murderous in the New Testament. But the real story told by Paul himself in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 is this. In Damascus, the governor under King Aretas, ally of Rome, had the city of the Damascenes guarded in order to arrest me, Paul. But I was lowered in a basket from a window in the wall and slipped through his hands. Do you understand what's happening here? The Romans and their allies are trying to kill Paul because Jesus' followers are claiming that Jesus is the Jewish king, which is a capital offense to Rome. You have to worship the emperor. But in Acts, it is changed. It's no longer the Romans who are trying to kill Paul. It is the Jews. And if that's not anti-Semitism, a blood libel, then I don't know what is. Pontius Pilate, the Romans write, kill Jesus. Tacitus says it explicitly. Pilate crucified hundreds of thousands of people. He was so brutal that when he slaughtered thousands of Samaritans for simply going up to their holy mountain, he was recalled by Rome for his cruelty. Do you know what it takes to be recalled by Rome for your cruelty? And yet we're told Pilate is sitting there, Matthew 27, arguing with the Jews who are praying for Jesus' blood. Crucify him. Let Barabbas go. Barabbas is a murderer. Let him go. And suddenly Pilate, genocidal mass murderer, suddenly cares for the leader of a tiny sect, and he says to the Jews, bring a pitcher of water. I need to wash my hands. I wanted for the historical record that while I've killed tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, I suddenly care about one Jew. And then it suddenly says in Matthew that all the Jews claimed his blood be upon us and upon our children. Do you know how many Jews died throughout the centuries because of that one verse? Do you know how many of my people were disemboweled, burned at the stake, expelled, and ultimately, as Christian anti-Judaism morphed into racial anti-Semitism, gassed because the charge of deicide was believed? Mike says that the Talmud says that the Jews killed Jesus. That comes from the Talmud. Sanhedrin 41a. It was taken out. It was later put back in. Mike knows that no serious scholar believes that that's Jesus, the founder of Christianity. In fact, the name Jesus appears in Josephus like 26 times. It was one of the most common names in ancient Israel. Even when Jesus is put together with Barabbas, Barabbas' name is also Jesus. Jesus Barabbas. And the Talmud there says, whoever that Jesus is, and the word Notzri, the Nazarene, is only in one edition of the Talmud in Munich. The Talmud says that for 40 days they send someone out to beg for exculpatory evidence to free whoever this Jesus was. The New Testament portrays the Jews as murderous. They try to kill Jesus 5 times. They try to kill Paul 9 times. St. Stephen, I could go on. The Jews are just portrayed constantly as murderous. But here's the reason why it's anti-Semitic. Mike is right. The prophets of Israel often castigate the Jews. Mike quotes in his article in the Jerusalem Post that the prophet Isaiah says, I don't even want to go because I may not even make it. The Jews might kill me. And what does God say to him? You're going anyway. I love these people. Hard-hearted as they may sometimes be, imperfect. America's an imperfect country. But we know the difference between patriotism is whether you essentially believe in the nation and its mission or whether you give up and say, let's replace them with someone else. That is the anti-Semitism of the New Testament. That the Jews were replaced. That the Jews were discarded. That the Jews, John says, are quite literally the children of Satan. Do you know what demonic power of which you must be possessed to kill God? Do you know how dark you have to be to kill God? And if you believe that someone is that evil, would you have a problem killing that person? Burning him at the stake? Kicking him out of your country with his children with nothing to eat when he's the spawn of the devil? It's for this reason that the Vatican itself wrote, quote, some New Testament references hostile or less favorable to Jews have their historical context, this is the Vatican, in conflicts between the nascent church and the Jewish community. Certain controversies reflect Christian-Jewish relations long after the times of Jesus. Translation, they inserted these verses 40, 50 years after the death of Jesus to destroy the Jews and exonerate the Romans. Now, why would they do that? Simple, logic. The Jews fought a war against the Romans, a very courageous war, but they lost. They lost big. You don't fight the Romans. The Romans came and killed everyone they could find. The Christians have one little problem. They are worshiping a dead Jew. That's a big problem. The Jews are now the most hated people in the whole empire, and the Jews are actually worshiping a Jew. 3 solutions. Number 1, Romans, we're like you. We hate them too. They're children of the devil. We can't stand them. Number 2, he wasn't really a Jew. He's a Christian. It took 2,000 years for people to begin to explore the Jewishness of Jesus. Before that, Jesus had become a Christian. He was treated as a Christian. For any of you who are offended, was it Ilan Omar or Rashida Tlaib who recently said that Jesus was a Palestinian? Jesus was a Jew. Get used to it. Solution number 3, tell the Romans, you know what? You think that you have a problem with them in this world? We have a problem with them in the next world. They're going to hell. Their religion doesn't even save. It was replaced. That's why Jesus died on the cross. And that's what led, and this is the saddest part, the first few hundred years of Christianity are so rife with such hatred of the Jewish people by the founders of the church that it is shocking beyond belief. And Mike does a very good job at recounting a lot of that in Our Hands Stained with Blood, but with one difference. And Mike, you'll have to tell me if I'm right or wrong here. In the original version of your book, you had a line that says that the Jews have suffered. I want to find it here. You wrote that the Jews have been punished by a counterfeit church with a counterfeit message. That's a pretty strong stuff. I want to find the exact quote, forgive me. And then I searched for it in the new edition, and I couldn't find it. I don't know if it was taken out or not. The message in the New Testament, the verses that say we killed Jesus, they're counterfeit. The part that says we're children of the devil, they're counterfeit. The part that says that Judaism is an obsolete religion, counterfeit. The part that says the Jews were unchosen by God, counterfeit. All the rest, Jesus was a Jew. He came for the lost sheep of Israel. He told the Canaanite woman, I can't even excise a dibbuk from your daughter because I came for the lost sheep of Israel, and it's not for me to take the bread of the children and throw it to the dogs. Jesus was very focused on saving the Jewish people. The part that says the truth, Luke chapter 13, verse 31, that the Pharisees tried to save Jesus, that part's true, because not all the editing of the New Testament was complete. And finally, my friends, Luke chapter 13, verse 1, where Jesus says, do you know what's going to happen to all of you if you don't follow the word of God? He says, Pilate just took a group of Galileans, he slaughtered them all, and then he was so sadistic, he actually mixed their blood with the blood of the animal sacrifices in the temple. This is Jesus talking. And we're supposed to be told that that same Pilate later is this righteous, incredible man trying to save the Jews from these, save Jesus from these devilish, murderous Jews. Our hands are stained with blood. It will not change until my dear friend Mike Brown and my dear friend Mitch Glazer and all my friends at Chosen People Ministries, and we're all going out to dinner afterward because we're friends, until they get up and say, we utterly renounce and repudiate now and forever a belief that Jews who don't believe in Jesus are going to hell, until that is stated emphatically and clearly, then the hatred, God forbid, even if it's not wanted, might just continue. Thank you very much.
Okay, just a request. Can you hear this mic? Okay, I was getting comments that things are muffled. Is it all right? Because I know Shmuley asked for his mic to be better than mine so he'd have an advantage. But can you hear me all right? Also, since I stopped exactly on time and he went 2 minutes over, do I get 2 minutes added in? To be fair? Yes? We're going to be fair? Righteous? Honest? Okay.
I got 2 Jewish minutes. That's like an hour.
Right. Understood. Agreed. Okay. Starting my time here. Wonderful example of 2 things you just saw. One, every truthful statement, Shmuley said, 100% supports my position, as I'll show you. Every statement that goes against it is fiction, including this idea that the New Testament was radically edited to get the favor of the Romans. The Romans were slaughtering Christians in the most horrific ways and continued to slaughter Christians. There is zero scholarly support for any of the reconstructions that were just offered. So you heard the figment of my friend's imagination, and if you want to go point for point academically, we'll do it. Here's the reality. Millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of Christians around the world love the Jewish people because of what's written in this book that my friend wants to edit. We don't need to edit it. It tells us the truth, and it tells us of God's ongoing covenant love with the Jewish people, and it does not teach that God has forever discarded the Jews and thrown them away. Instead, as I quoted, Paul says the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. The Jewish people remain loved by God, and Paul even speaks of the day of Israel's national salvation just as the prophets do. It's interesting. Rabbi Shmuley said there are 450 attacks on the Jews in the New Testament, and they're called the children of Satan. Well, Rabbi Shmuley, you've had time to prepare. Just give me 3 verses, just 3, in the entire New Testament where the Jews are called the children of Satan. Tell you what, 1 verse where all Jews are called the children of Satan. You hear the 450 thing, throw it out. The reality is quite the opposite. Yeah, why does the New Testament talk so much about sinning Jewish leaders? Because there were Jewish leaders who sinned, just like we have throughout the Hebrew Bible. Here, I could give you, how about this? God's words to Israel. Torah, say to the Israelite people, you're a stiff-necked people. If I were to go in your midst for one moment, I'd destroy you. That's God. Is God anti-Semitic? How about this? Moses, well, I know how defiant and stiff-necked you are. Even now, while I'm still alive in your midst, you've been defiant toward the Lord. How much more than when I'm dead? Moses, who is it that follows Jesus in the New Testament? Jews. All the disciples are Jews. How are you going to say it's anti-Semitic when it's about a Jewish Messiah followed by Jews? Who gets criticized? The Jews who rejected the Messiah, and they should be criticized for that because he appeared in glory, worked miracles, healed the sick, rose from the dead himself, and even after that, Peter says, you did it in ignorance. Turn back because God wants to have mercy on you. Even Matthew 27:25 is misquoted. You have a Jewish crowd, it doesn't say all the Jews. You have a Jewish crowd who says, we take the responsibility. His blood be on us and our children. In other words, we take the responsibility. It's not saying all generations, that's A, and B, it's not saying all Jews. As for the New Testament picture of Pilate, How could a man so cruel and sadistic say, okay, who do you want me to give to? He's tweaking the Jewish leaders because he knows, it says he knows that they're against Jesus. He's after them. He's playing games with them. It's a consistent picture of Pilate. Shmuley takes umbrage for me saying what the Hebrew Bible says, that as a nation, historically, we have been under judgment. That's why we've been scattered. That's why we've been exiled. I never wrote it, never said it, that the Holocaust happened because Jews didn't believe in Jesus, but that was thrown in to give you the impression that I might to sow seeds of discord. I've not said that, but I have said what the Torah says, what the prophets say. Leave out the New Testament entirely. Do you agree with what's written in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28? That as we've been scattered and judged, that much of this has been because of our sins. How is it anti-Semitic then to say it? In point of fact, the reason that Paul has conflict was because he was an ultra-zealous Jewish man that went so far that he wanted to kill Jewish followers of Jesus. And when he came to the faith, it was a real threat. That's the same reason when I was in Israel last year, a counter-missionary got me arrested for no good reason. I mean, they told me to leave after being arrested and just smiled at me. He got me arrested. I had people spitting at my feet. I've had an Orthodox Jew spit in my face and threaten to strangle me to death if he ever saw me speaking the faith to anyone. I have Messianic Jewish friends in Israel who from ultra-Orthodox have had their building firebombed. Another kid was blown up by a crazed Orthodox Jew. I'm not going to say that's anti-Semitic. I'm going to say that's a crazed person doing crazy things and wrong things. This is what fanatics do on all sides. Rather than sowing discord, let's join together against the fanaticism. Let's join together against the religious hatred, and let's denounce it rather than sow seeds of enmity and hatred right here in our midst. There's massive debate. Thank you. There's actually massive debate among scholars in terms of whether the Talmud speaks of the same Jesus, Yeshua, or not. And that's one of the things I deal with anti-Semites about all the time. The passages I mention are often considered to be what the Talmud says about Jesus of Nazareth. But let's put that aside. I quoted to you what Maimonides said. I quoted that he said the Jews turned him over to the Romans to be killed because he aspired to be the Messiah. And furthermore, there's a couple more notes here. If we simply go back to what I was saying, it's really, really simple. A Jewish book about the Jewish Messiah, and the conflicts are inner Jewish conflicts. I could read you quotes from opponents of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, okay? From one of the leading rabbis in Israel, and died a few years ago, calling him the madman in Brooklyn that drives the whole world crazy, and saying that Lubavitch is the religion closest to Judaism. And I could read you things from the Misnagdim, those who oppose the Hasidic movement. And then I could read you things, back and forth, ugly attacks, things that go beyond what's written in the New Testament in terms of attacking one another, but it's an inner Jewish battle. And people understand it, just like in the family, when you're in your own home, you might speak to one another in ways that are more spirited than you would when you're outside among others. This is a book about inner Jewish conflict, and what's recorded is true. What's recorded is accurate. We had leaders, including a corrupt high priest that Rabbi Shmuley has spoken about as a corrupt high priest. And we had these leaders who worked together because they did not believe in Jesus. They did not believe he was the Messiah. They thought it was going to be a threat in the eyes of Rome if he was proclaimed as king. Whatever their reasons were, they rejected him, and that's their sin, and they're guilty of it. And I'm not going to deny that. And the crowds revered Jesus. And even Matthew 21, it's quoted there, that Jesus says the kingdom is going to be taken from you, the corrupt leadership, and given to a people bearing its fruit. And what does it say? The leaders heard this and knew he was talking about them, but they were afraid to do anything because the Jewish crowds thought that Jesus was a prophet. Read the New Testament for yourself. Read it for yourself. It says all people outside of Jesus are under the power of Satan. Ephesians 2, 1 John 5. Read it for yourself. I can give you verse after verse to support that. It does not single out the Jews except for special promises. Paul writes in Romans 9 that the covenant promises belong to the Jewish people. And that's why he said, I could die and be cut off from the Messiah myself. I could perish if I could see any of my people saved. So, Shmuley, it is love that compels me to speak the truth. I want everyone to know about Jesus. Grads from our school go all around the world as missionaries. They share the gospel with Muslims, with Hindus, with atheists. They share the gospel with everything. I will not withhold the good news of Jesus the Messiah from our Jewish people. At the same time, I will stand with you to the death to prevent anti-Semitism and to say, if you're going to touch my friend Shmuley, you got to get through me first. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. Dun, 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 dun. See, these glasses turned out to be a really apt metaphor. Because when we get home, I'm going to say to my wife, why did you give me these things? And she's going to say, because you're not as hot as you think you are. And we're going to have a marital squabble. And a marital squabble is where people who love each other disagree on things. And because I love my wife, I give her the right to be wrong. Because I've never been wrong in this marriage. A divorce, God forbid, is something completely different. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah, they told the Jewish people how much God loved them and wanted them back, even if they made mistakes. The New Testament said, you're divorced. You are a child who has been disinherited. You blew it. You're out. It goes further. You will be severely punished. I'm not saying, I don't know what Mike is referring to when he says, I wonder if we take seriously the intensity and the scope of the horrible judgments that have already fallen upon us in the past, and they will happen again if we follow a similar course of behavior. You have to explain that. You wrote it, not me. What are those horrible, horrible things that have happened to the Jews because they rejected Jesus? Come on, my friends. I know Mike is a loving man, and I have deep respect for him, but isn't that the essence of anti-Semitism, to say that the Jews are punished for adhering to the Jewish God and the Torah, and they're being punished for rejecting Jesus? Come on. I thought we moved past all this stuff. The verse that I was looking for, I found. There is nothing that I said tonight about interpolations in the New Testament that came later, or the need for Christian evangelicals who love Israel and the Jewish people to reinterpret those verses. Nothing is as severe as what Mike himself wrote. Our Jewish people have been persecuted, abused, expelled, and even killed for rejecting, listen carefully, a counterfeit message of a counterfeit Christ preached by a counterfeit church. And there is blood on the hands of that church. Nothing I have said comes close to that. Nothing. Now, as far as Mike saying, where is the verse where the Jews are referred to as, and Mike's a great biblical scholar. John chapter 8, verse 39, Jesus says to the Jews, "Why do you not understand what I say? It is because you cannot accept my word. You are from your father, the devil, and you choose to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him." And I ask all of you, the Prince of Peace, Jesus, a Jew, murdered by Rome, do you really believe he said that? Do you think he called his fellow Jews the devil? There are 40 anti-Semitic verses in Mark, 60 in Luke, 80 in Matthew, 140 in Acts of the Apostles, and 130 in John. And John, unfortunately, is the worst. Here's just some examples. Mark chapter 3, the Pharisees are said to have begun to destroy Jesus. Chapter 14, the chief priests and council condemn Jesus as deserving death. Matthew chapter 3, the Pharisees and Sadducees are called poisonous snakes. In Chapter 12, they're called evil poisonous snakes. Chapter 15, Pharisees are called blind guides who lead the blind. Chapter 26, the chief priests and council condemn Jesus as deserving death. Chapter 27, the people demand that Jesus, not Barabbas, the murderer, be crucified. Luke, chapter 4, members of the synagogue in Nazareth trying to kill Jesus. Chapter 7, the Pharisees are said to have rejected the purposes of God. Chapter 22, the chief priests and council condemn Jesus as deserving death. Book of John, chapter 5, the Jews are said to have persecuted Jesus and wanted to kill him. Chapter 5, it is said that God's word and God's love is not in the Jews. Chapter 7, it is said that none of the Jews do what is written in the Torah. Chapter 8, the Jews are descendants of their father the devil. Chapter 10, the Jews are thieves and robbers. Chapter 10, the Jews are depicted as those who steal and kill and destroy. Acts, chapter 2, Peter tells the men of Israel they crucified Jesus. Chapter 2 again, Peter tells the men of Israel that they crucified Jesus. He repeats it. Chapter 3, Peter tells the men of Israel that they killed the originator of life. Not the Romans, not Pilate, the Jews themselves. Of course, Jesus himself had called Peter a liar and promised him that he would deny him 3 times. And Peter said, I would never do that, and he does exactly that. So Peter's testimony as to the Jewish murder of Jesus is not to be believed according to the words of Jesus himself. Chapter 13, it is said that Jews cannot be forgiven by means of the Torah. Chapter 18, Paul told the Jews, your blood will be on your own heads. Chapter 21, the Jews are depicted as seizing Paul and trying to kill him. Chapter 23, Jews are said to have plotted to eat nothing until they killed Paul. Chapter 23, Paul is said to have been nearly killed by the Jews. Chapter 25, Jews are said to have plotted to kill Paul. Chapter 28, Paul is said to have condemned the Jews for never understanding God. In the words of Daniel Jonah Goldhagen, who I actually spoke to today, he wrote that very important book, Hitler's Willing Executioners and then A Moral Reckoning, quote, the anti-Semitism of the Christian Bible is not incidental to it, but constitutive of its story of Jesus, both his life and death, and its message about God. It is not just that the Christian Bible contains a few unfortunate anti-Semitic remarks. It is not just that the anti-Semitism is liberally spread throughout the text. And it is not just that the anti-Semitism is not casual in character, but ferocious. Rather, the Christian Bible presents its Christian faithful with a relentless and withering assault on Jews and Judaism. The structure of the Gospels in particular is anti-Semitic. The Jews are presented as the ontological enemy of Jesus and therefore of goodness. They are the impediment in the book's story. The story's narrative structure, its force, its many warnings and inducements depend on the castigation of the Jews as the essential and dramatic villains who oppose, reject, and assault Jews. For Christians to understand evil in this world, a Satan must oppose God. For the authors of the Christian Bible to understand Jesus on earth, they needed a terrestrial Satan, and so they invent and present a Satan in the person of the Jews.
Well, I love debating my friend Shmuley. What a great spirited discussion. Ah, sinful nation, people laden with iniquity, brood of evildoers, depraved children. Oh, that's not New Testament, sorry, that's Isaiah speaking about our people. He must be an anti-Semite. But they mocked the messengers of Satan and disdained his words and taunted his prophets until the wrath of the Lord against his people grew beyond remedy. Ooh, that's from our Hebrew Bible about our people while we went into exile. I guess the Hebrew Bible is anti-Semitic. I will hide my face from them and see what their end will be, for they are a perverse generation, children who are unfaithful. Ooh, those are the words of the Lord in the Torah. I guess God himself is anti-Semitic. Look, the fact of the matter is the New Testament just tells us what actually happened. And Maimonides tells us what happened, that our leadership rejected Jesus, and there was a constant battle between our leaders and his followers. Just like in Israel today with Messianic Jews, it happens all the time. It's factual history. It's not anti-Semitic to tell the truth. It's anti-Semitic to demonize a people as the whole, and the New Testament doesn't do that. Notice the verses I quoted. Salvation is from the Jews, and they're loved by God because of the patriarchs, and the covenant promises remain to them. There's no response to those verses. And notice, if you do it Rabbi Shmuley's way, that the New Testament's anti-Semitism is, quote, not incidental, as Daniel Judah Goldhagen says, then that means you have to rewrite the whole thing. No, you don't rewrite the sacred texts which go back to the eyewitnesses and the apostles. What you do is you rightly interpret them. And there's still been no explanation why so many here, Christians and watching around the world, are such fervent lovers of Israel. If the New Testament so demonizes the Jewish people, then why do so many of you here who are Christians love the Jewish people and stand with Israel? As Shmuley knows, you are the greatest allies of the Jewish people on the planet. As a black Christian friend of mine said in a synagogue meeting, if anyone tries to touch you, we will die for you. That's because of the New Testament, not despite it. So let us get back to the simple facts. Whether you believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah or not, the New Testament is a Jewish book about the Jewish Messiah that tells the truth. And by the way, John 8:44, speaking to certain Jewish people who didn't believe Jesus, says you're of their father the devil. There's no verse in the New Testament that says all Jews are of their father the devil. And there are other verses that say all human beings that reject Jesus are under the power of Satan. That's a New Testament concept, like it or not. But bottom line is, there has been a horrific history of anti-Semitism in the church as well. And maybe as an evangelical leader, I've done more to address it and expose it than just about anybody. It is because of a misuse and abuse of the New Testament. Let's use it rightly and bless the Jewish people at the same time. Thank you.
Isaiah 43. Who created you, O Jacob? Who formed you, O Israel? Fear not, for I will redeem you. I have singled you out by name. You are mine. Isaiah 43. When you pass through water, I will be with you. Through streams, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be scorched. Through flame, it shall not burn you. Because you are precious to me and honored, and I love you. I give men in exchange for you and peoples in your stead. And finally, Ezekiel 37. Thus saith the Lord, I am going to take the Israelite people from among the nations they have gone to and gather them from every quarter and bring them to their own land. No one is saying the Jews are perfect. They're far from it. But they're God's chosen people who God loves. And that's not the message you get from the New Testament, where I'm assuming that applause means you all love me in particular. There's a special love for short, hairy Jews that is harbored in the hearts of so many. But that's not the message you get from the New Testament. Matthew, Jesus says in chapter 21, I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you. That's not a rebuke. That's far more than a rebuke. Matthew 23, your house will be abandoned. It'll be desolate for having rejected me. Paul in Acts chapter 13, when the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy, and Paul said, since you reject the message of Jesus and do not consider yourselves worthy of eternal life, we now turn to the Gentiles. Mike, where did Zechariah ever say that? Where did Jeremiah ever say that? Where did Mike ever say that? You Jews are finished. Paul, Acts chapter 25. Therefore, I want you to know that God's salvation has been sent to the Gentiles, and they will listen. And finally, all of Paul's attacks on Judaism. Paul, Acts chapter 13. There's a justification you were not able to obtain under the law of Moses. Paul's relentless assault on Judaism. You observe days and months, he says in Galatians chapter 4, and seasons and years. I fear for you that perhaps I have labored over you in vain. You're still keeping Judaism? You mean I wasted my time on all of you trying to rip you away from the cradle of the Torah and the prophets and Jewish observance and to explain to you that Jesus died for your sins? This is all obsolete, and the people who are observing this are going to the eternal bonfire in hell because they don't believe in Jesus. I give up on you guys. I've already given up on the Jews. I may give up on you Gentiles too unless you finally get this message. That's the problem. So let me state emphatically and clearly, I love my Christian brothers and sisters, and I have the highest respect for the Christian faith. I ask simply for that love in return. Tell me, Mike, that as a Jew who puts on tefillin, who wears tzitzis, who wears a yarmulke, who keeps the Sabbath, who will fast this Sunday, even though I don't want to for Tisha B'Av, for the destruction of the first, second temple. Tell me it means that I will go to heaven. Tell me it means that my soul will be close to God. Because unless you can say that publicly, unless you can declare, Shmuley, the way you are as a Jew is just fine, it's perfect, then you will perpetuate the stereotypes that there's something wrong, inadequate, and obsolete about the Jewish nation.
Thank you, man. We really appreciate what you've presented so far, and I'm sure it has stimulated a number of questions that you have. And so I'm taking this brief moment to ask you to pass those questions to either this aisle or that aisle so that we will be able to assemble them and ask the best questions that we have. I also want to announce that books are available from both authors. They are in the foyer. And if you want them to sign the books, I'm sure they would be happy to help out. Dr. Brown will be on the right-hand side, and Rabbi Boteach will be on the left-hand side to me afterwards. Now, this is the time for a conversation. And we'll see what the conversation is like. I want to invite both men up to their respective podia. And we will... No. Okay. You in, sir? No. Oh, put it back there. And all I have to say is don't make me come back here.
So can we kind of go back and forth maybe? We don't have rules for this, and we've never quite done this. So let the cage come down. No, okay.
You're a lot bigger than me. And he's still angry at me because in the Jerusalem Post 3 days ago, I called him a dinosaur. And that was a compliment because dinosaurs are big and strong. I mean, look at me. This is an unfair match, let's face it.
Yeah, this actually has inspired something, and I think I'm just going to leave this up here in tribute to being called a dinosaur, so we can throw that back down there. So this is my personal offering to you,
really?
to think of me.
Do I really get to keep it?
Yeah, you're
I
allowed
should
to
have
keep
called
it.
you a Cartier watch.
You should have. I passed one up on the street for $15 tonight, though. But
Thank you.
Let me go back to a couple of texts just to ask you. In Matthew 21, right, it says that the scribes and the Pharisees, when Jesus said the kingdom of God is going to be taken from you and given to a people who bear its fruit, it says that the scribes and the Pharisees knew he was talking about them because these are parables through Matthew 21 about the vineyard owners and the leaders. It's going to be taken from you and given to a people bearing its fruit. And it says that they were afraid to do anything because the crowds, the Jewish crowds, thought it was a prophet. So it's going to be taken away from you, the Jews, but the leadership is going to be taken away from you and given to a people bearing its fruit. Who was that? It was all the Jewish apostles. So do you dispute that that's what it actually says there?
But you see, what you're saying is a classic example of what I am looking for. You are interpreting the verses to be less hostile to the Jews or not hostile to the Jews, and that's all I'm really arguing for. Not just that verse, but every verse. So, for example, I understand that the New Testament is a Christian holy book and is considered by my Christian brothers and sisters to be divinely inspired and divinely authored. I understand that. I also understand it can be seen as almost offensive or insulting to say that there are parts of it that were fraudulently doctored to demonize the Jews. I completely understand that. Even though the Vatican basically said that, But many people in this room may not be Catholic, and they may not agree with what the Vatican said. So what I would ask, therefore, is to do what you're doing, Mike, and that's interpret the verses to be purged of that hostility. I'll give you an example, and I wrote this in the Jerusalem Post thing. We Jews have a written law, but as you well know, and I've been to your office in North Carolina, you don't just have the Hebrew Bible, you actually have the Talmud, you have the Mishnah, you have the Medrash. You quoted the Medrash in the Jerusalem Post this week. You know that the written law is only understood through the tradition of the oral law. So for example, when it says an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, are we Jews barbarians? If someone knocks out someone's eye, a Jewish court is going to go and take them and cut their eye out? No, we've always interpreted to mean financial restitution. There's an accepted tradition. Where is the oral tradition in Christianity as to what these verses mean? So for example, if it says that the Jews are the children of Satan, maybe there's an oral tradition that explains he didn't really mean that. He was saying it to make a specific point. Jesus never considered the Jews to be the children of Satan. That's what I'm looking for. But it all comes down, respectfully, to one thing. Are you prepared to go the whole 9 yards and say that Shmuley, you as an Orthodox Jew who does not believe in Jesus, who remains dependent on the law, that you're going to heaven? Are you prepared to say that?
I'm going to answer you completely directly in a moment, because this has come up before. Okay. I've never asked you this question, but I'm going to, okay, my answer to you is that the best Jew on the planet, the best Christian on the planet, the best Hindu on the planet, at their best day, is not righteous enough to receive eternal life. And that you and I need the mercy of the Messiah. So if we reject that mercy, we're lost. Now,
no, but define lost. Wait. What I like about our debates, and all of you saw this, that amidst a genuine friendship and affection that exists between us, we don't pull punches. No, we don't take prisoners. These are real debates. And that's important, by the way, because one of the points that I failed to make, just because time constraints, is, you know, Mike, the 25% of the Jewish community who are the pro-Israel community, fighters for Israel, they're the ones who most appreciate the evangelicals. The other 70% of Jews who are more liberal, politically, they may be more democratic. They're actually very suspicious, as you know, of evangelical Christians. They're suspicious of their motives. So what I want to show my entire community, and I hope that, listen, there are also more liberal Christians. There are mainline Protestant denominations who are not friendly to Israel, many of whom even participated in the BDS movement. I want to show them that we have real conversations. So when you say the word lost, I feel that's a euphemism. What do you mean I'm lost? You mean I need a GPS? You mean I need Google Maps? What does lost mean?
Right, so it can be, in New Testament terms, understood in one of two. And first, I'm not your judge. I really hope that if I believe that you're lost or even hellbound, I hope I'm wrong, honestly. I don't hope I'm wrong about my faith in Jesus, but I would be wonderfully surprised to see, you got the most amazing kids I've met. Your wife's amazing. I love hanging out with your family.
My wife's amazing. Did you see these glasses she gave me? Okay.
So you're asking my view. I'm not your judge, and I'm glad I'm not your judge. Okay, we're both going to stand before the same God. All right, I just believe you on your best day, me on my best day, we fall short. All right, so lost is understood in one of two ways in New Testament terminology. Either you are cut off from eternal life, so you die and that's it. You die, you're judged by God, and that's it. You don't receive eternal life. That's the end of the story. Or lost is that there's an eternal hell. There's a debate among Christians among these things, okay? But it's going to be the exact same thing for Hindus, for Buddhists, for Muslims. In other words, it would be just as offensive, God willing, when I debate some Muslims in London in November, if we have the same conversation. I mean, they believe I'm lost. I believe they're lost. But exactly how it plays, I don't know. Here's my question for you, though. I was told by a Lubavitch rabbi at Stony Brook University years ago that if it was in the Second Temple period, that I would have molten steel poured down my throat. I understand.
And why?
Because I'm an idolater, and I'm leading people. I'm not just a choteh, I'm a machti. I'm not just a sinner. I'm leading others into sin. I've been called public enemy number one. I've had an ultra-Orthodox rabbi told me that I'm going to hell. Okay. Now I have no problem with them believing that. I have zero problem. I understand that our forefathers died rather than believe some of the things I believe, although I don't believe the vast majority heard the true message, but they died rather than hear. And here I am trying to proselytize. Right? So in your view of your understanding of God, here I am a Jew. I've been around enough. I've done the debates. It's not like I know Tinok Shinishba is a child born in captivity, but still, I think I know. I've seen, I've heard the arguments. In your view, is God the God of the Torah, the God of Jewish tradition, going to accept me and say, you go to heaven, even though you believe in Jesus, and that's an idolatrous thing for a Jew to do?
Okay, fair question. You're going to hell, Mike. Okay. I'm kidding. You're actually very fortunate that you're not going to hell because we Jews don't believe in hell. So this is what I plan to do, and I want you to do the same thing. Here's my advice. When you, God forbid, after 120 years, both of us should live to see the Messiah. We may understand him differently, but I'm waiting for Mashiach to come. So after 120 years, if they send you to hell, I want you to say to them, look, Rabbi Shmuley told me that Jews don't believe in hell. And they're going to say, darn it. And they're going to be forced to let you go. Try it. It will work. I have just given you a get out of hell free card. Look, you well know that Jews don't believe in hell. We believe in Gehenna. You know that it can only be up to 12 months. You know it is a cleansing and purging. So the Christian idea of hell and the Jewish idea of Gehenna is radically different. I mean, you're well aware of that. And heaven and hell, they're not categories that we Jews discuss very much. We've talked about this in some of our previous debates. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the greatest, one of perhaps the greatest sage of the Talmudic period, who famously creates, the Yavne Yeshiva, which saves Judaism from the Romans. As he's on his deathbed, he famously says, "Anu yadela malichim I don't know if I'm going to the good place or the bad place." And why? Because as a sage, he never thought about it. It's just not categories within which we Jews think. Because if worshiping God and being righteous means that there is no reward, we would still do it. For us Jews, living by God's word has meant the gas chambers, and we still did it. It has meant being burned at the stake, and we still did it. Why does everything have to be about reward and punishment? And I know that I'm the one that asked you the question, but it's not about whether you believe I'm going to heaven or hell. It's about whether you believe that my religion is capable of redemption, righteousness, and salvation. Because if you don't, then you're reinforcing everything that I said. My main point is, and this debate is about, let's stay focused on the subject, and this debate is about whether the New Testament is anti-Semitic. My main point is not just the 450 anti-Semitic attacks on Jews in the New Testament. My point is its major theological complaint that the Jews were replaced, that Judaism is obsolete, that the Jews were unchosen, that there was a new religion to replace Judaism. There was a New Testament, Brit Chadashah, that the Jews are, they're the Old Testament. I don't even like using that word, the Old Testament. I use the word the Hebrew Bible. So Mike, if you can't say to me that Judaism is a redemptive religion, then you're reinforcing everything that I said.
Right, so let's just turn this around and try to understand. First, Brit Chadashah, New Covenant, comes from the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 to 34. So it's a biblical concept. This is not something new that's been introduced by Christians. But basically, to be consistent and to be honest, okay? First, we believe that the true Jewish faith is the one that embraces Jesus as the Messiah. In other words, that it's just doing what the Hebrew Scriptures said, and that he came as the Messiah of Israel and rose from the dead as the Messiah of Israel. And the reason he becomes the Savior of the world is because he's the Messiah of Israel. But you do not believe that he died for the sins of the world. You do not believe that he rose from the dead and ascended to heaven. You do not believe that he fulfilled the Messianic prophecies. Therefore, what you're saying is what all Christians through all history have believed is fundamentally wrong. So why do you...
With Jews and Judaism?
No, just about Jesus. Do you believe it's right...
When you said that fundamentally wrong, what do you mean wrong?
That it's fundamentally untrue.
Okay.
That Jesus did not really fulfill the Messianic prophecies, that he did not really die for the sins of the world, that he did not really rise from the dead, that he did not really ascend to heaven, that he's not really coming back as the Messiah and King to establish his kingdom on the earth. So you are saying that as a Jew, you reject completely, which is your right, okay? You reject completely the fundamental truths of the New Testament on which Christians are dying for their faith, being butchered. I mean, you share this concern too, being beheaded, being burned alive, being tortured to death, because they believe these things, which you say are not true, but that you're allowed to say that, but if I say your beliefs are wrong, I become an anti-Semite. I don't think that's fair.
No, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. I will state categorically something that you're not prepared to state. I will state categorically that my Christian brothers and sisters who live righteous, moral, ethical lives are absolutely going to heaven. It's always been a Jewish belief. You do not have to be a Jew to be saved. We do not believe in one path to truth. What's true? Being masculine or feminine, being a man or a woman. For a long time, we asserted that being a man was a much better thing, and women were dominated, oppressed, they had no rights. They couldn't vote in this country until 100 years ago. Imagine women couldn't vote in the United States of America because we thought being a guy was better. And if a man had a boy, he was all happy. If he had a girl, he would try again until he had a boy. In places like China, they would murder girls, or India, this terrible, terrible things. Now, thank God, we know that that's balderdash, that men and women are absolutely equal, but they're very different. And when they join together, they create a higher completion. I always use the Kabbalistic idea of the masculine represented in the Kabbalah as something linear, the feminine representing by something cyclical, and when you put them together, you get perfection, 10. So it's about the two of them coming together. I want to learn from the faith of my Christian brothers and sisters. I love the passion that my Christian brothers and sisters have in their faith in Jesus and their faith in Hebrews, in Christian scripture. But when they understand that scripture or the belief in Jesus to say that I have no rights, no spiritual rights, that I'm obsolete, that God forsook me, that I'm going to be punished, that my people were already punished, then what kind of message is that? That's not a loving message. Don't tell me that's a loving message. That's just word games. If you love someone, you don't believe that they're going to burn forever, even though they lived a righteous life and they raised their kids and they gave charity and they tried to be loving in marriage and they learned to forgive and they're still going to hell because they don't have the right beliefs. That has been the whole problem of persecution throughout history. It is the essence of bigotry. It is the essence of prejudice. We have to get beyond that. And Mike, respectfully, I want to tell you all, I am the father of 9 children, thank God. And even if my 9 kids had clapped for me, I would have gotten more than that time. I mean, can a father of 9 kids at least get his children to come to his debates and clap? I mean, if I can't get the loyalty of my own kids, I have some of them here. So Mike, that's why I wrote respectfully, that you're a dinosaur in the Christian community, respectfully, because what I'm saying is you're a good man, and you have many students, and we've debated many times, and you're a scholar, and you have a wonderful wife and wonderful kids, and I always look at how a man raises his children to see the quality of the man and the ethics of the man, and you're a very good man. But I feel that you are still stuck in a theology that I believe most of my evangelical brothers and sisters are rejecting today. I don't believe they focus on proselytizing us as much. Maybe the people in this room feel differently. But if I go to Kufi, and I love going to Christians United for Israel or other Christian organizations that fight for Israel, I'm not there so they can proselytize me. I'm not there so they can convert me. They love Israel because of Scripture. And they're not trying to proselytize me. And they would never say that I'm going to hell because I'm a Jew. So I think your theology, actually, people have kind of moved on. And that was my whole point. And I feel you're still very trapped in this belief. And maybe, if I can say this respectfully, maybe it's the fact that you're a Jew who converted to Christianity and you need to justify this very strongly in your own mind and through the own choices you made in your life, that you have to make sure that the rest of the Jews come along for the ride. So let me tell you. When you tell me that a Lubavitcher stopped you and said that you would have
molten
yeah, well, let me tell you that guy, his words are a disgrace to the Jewish religion, and I repudiate everything that he said. You are my fellow Jew. I have always treated you as a fellow Jew. Had we had the time, if you would have been willing, I don't know if you would have been willing. When my son Mendy had his tefillin before, I would have put on tefillin with you. I would never have told you that you're going to be punished by God. I would have told you do a mitzvah. You're a Jew. That will never change. All the holy water in the world will never change the fact that you are a Jew and you are a child of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Absolutely. And I've never treated you differently. So I reject the kind of hatred that you were told. And that man is ignorant. And he's hatefully ignorant. And I want to see a world. Do you all believe that the battle today is really between Christians and Jews? The battle today is between radical Islam, Not Muslims, I want to make that clear. Muslims are my brothers and sisters under God. But radical Islam that wants to annihilate my people, that's a real problem. Or white supremacists, many of whom claim to be Christians, who are the biggest fakers on earth. They're an abomination before God. They're the enemy. But you and I are not the enemy. And even your beliefs, even if you believe that I am going to hell with my little dinosaur because I have the wrong beliefs, that doesn't mean that you have to necessarily articulate it. Many of you might actually believe, wow, Rabbi Shmuley is really short. But keep it to yourselves. You don't have to get up and announce it. That's the whole point. You don't have to necessarily announce to the world that you think that the Jews are spiritually inadequate and they're going to the big bonfire.
Right, so actually, if we think this through, the one who keeps announcing the hell thing is my colleague over here, okay? And keeps pushing that. What I keep pushing is the promises of the New Testament. And see, here's what you're missing, Shmuley. There's another path here. And there's so much just to respond to. Let me just quickly, how many of you consider yourselves here Christians, followers of Jesus? Just raise your hands. How many of you?
Only a few?
Okay, put your hands down. How many of you really want to see Jewish people come to faith in Jesus and think it's important? Okay, it looks like there are a whole bunch of dinosaurs here, and like the dinosaur Paul and the dinosaur Matthew, so I'm in good dinosaur company. But see, here's...
By the way, may I say, I'm not going to interrupt you, I just want to say, I happen to love dinosaurs.
Right, okay.
I don't know why you take it as a pejorative. My kids, all my boys grew up, I remember Mendy knew what a long neckosaurus was. Is there a long neckosaurus? I love dinosaurs.
Yeah. When I read the words in the Jerusalem Post of you calling me a dinosaur, I could feel the love and the warmth. I did it. I was imagining a T-Rex. In fact, you called me T-Rex the other day to be affectionate. Okay, but look. Here's the path that my friend is missing. And I do want us to unite together and to call for Jews and Christians together as one to stand against the rising tide of anti-Semitism, because it's rising in ugly ways. And every day, by the minute online, I get attacked because I'm a Jew. There are so-called Christians who so hate the Jews that because I speak the truth about the Talmud, said I'm not a Talmudic Jew, I have a whole volume of 300 pages, volume 5 of Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus, why I'm not a Talmudic Jew, but these are lies about the Talmud. When I say that, I've been told I'm a fake Jew, I'm a Mossad agent, I'm a Zionist shill, and I work for Chabad, okay? This is what I've been told because I'll tell the truth about this, all right? Zionist is now a dirty word among people. So we want to unite together, but I want to show you the path you're missing. No one is, quote, going to hell because they're a Jew, because they're anything. It's ultimately something between us and God where we accept his mercy, which then transforms our lives, or we reject his mercy. But I fervently hope you're righteous enough to get in. I just think any of us are. I believe what Isaiah said, that our righteousness is like filthy rags. That's why we need the Messiah. And out of love, we tell them, but I'm not the judge of anybody here. That's between you and God. And our message is, look at the love of God displayed in the cross. We sinned, we rebelled. God sent his son to die in our place. That's love. No matter how you construe that, you cannot make that into hate. That's love. And when Paul was upset with the Galatians, it's because as Gentiles, they thought they had to keep the law of Moses to be saved. He said, no, you're Gentiles. But what did he say in 1 Corinthians 7? If you're called to salvation and you're circumcised, don't become uncircumcised. What does it say in Acts 21? That he took a vow to show that he was not teaching Jews to forsake Moses or the customs of Israel, but rather he was telling Gentiles you don't have to come under the law. We simply relate to Torah in a different way. We relate without temple sacrifices. We relate in a different way. But here's the path that Shmuley, I believe...
Can I just respond to that for 1 second? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Do you mind? If I had to distill Jewish history into one sentence, it would be, do the right because it's right and not because you ever expect a reward. The one thing we Jews have learned is that no matter how faithful we are to God, and I think we've been immensely faithful to God's word, it doesn't mean that we're not going to be tortured or killed for it. How does Moses' life end? And I always say this to my kids. Every year, Simchat Torah, as you know, Mike, is the happiest day of the Jewish calendar. And we complete the reading of the 5 books of Moses. And the synagogues, the people are drinking single malt whiskey, my favorite. And it's a very joyous day. And I always say to my kids, why is this a joyous day? Look what we read. We read about the death of Moses. We read about Moses climbing up Mount Nebo, the very end of the book of Deuteronomy. And God says to him, by the way, Moses, you've done an amazing job of 40 years and 40 years. And here's your reward. You're going to climb the mountain completely alone. No one's going to say Kaddish for you. No one's going to know where you're buried. There's no monument, no 21-gun salute, no equestrian statue, absolutely nothing. The people will not even be able to pray at your grave. And Moses absorbs this very difficult message, and he starts to climb. And then the Torah ends, and there died Moses. And there never arose a prophet in Israel like Moses. And the message, you do the right because it's right. When no troubadours will sing your praises, when no minstrels will create a beautiful hymn, you do the right because it's right. We in the Jewish community, we who practice Judaism, have never thought in terms of heaven and hell. I know that for my Christian brothers and sisters, it's something almost impossible to comprehend because of how much emphasis is put on salvation and being saved. But for us, worshiping God is not supposed to be about self-interest. It's not supposed to be about eternal bliss. I am very fortunate in that, thank God, I am not from a Holocaust family. It's remarkable to be a Jew of half Ashkenazi descent. My father's Sephardic. His family traces its roots back 2,500 years in Iran. And my mother's Ashkenazi. I'm Ashkefardi. But my grandfather, who was a great man, had the foresight at the beginning of the 20th century to work to bring all of his brothers and sisters, large family, from Poland to the United States. He saved his whole family. He had 9 brothers and sisters. So for me, the Holocaust was something that I was consumed with, but from a distance, because it didn't affect my family. When I married my wife, Debbie, and a Holocaust family, to see how the torture, what they had been through. My wife's grandmother, who I miss so much, whose name was Rachalea, my wife's great uncle, Zolly, who was murdered in Auschwitz, taken when he was 16 on a train. And to read the family's story. And you know what, Mike? All of this family, I was a rabbinical student in Sydney, which is how I got to know my wife. She's from Australia. They continued to keep the Torah. My father-in-law was the president of his shul for many years. They didn't say, God, you slaughtered our families in Auschwitz. We're done. Where's the reward? So that is the incredible thing about the Jewish people. We don't think in terms of reward and punishment. So to be honest, and I don't mean to be offensive, whether you believe I'm going to heaven or hell doesn't bother me. Your opinion of my afterlife really doesn't much concern me, only insofar as how you treat me in this world.
Right. So
because I think it bears upon how you treat me in this world.
Allow me to jump back in. Of course, ethical behavior matters. Read the New Testament. You want ethics? Read the Sermon on the Mount. If Christians had lived by what was written in the New Testament, they would have been blessing Jewish people. They would have been praying for Jewish people. And even while they preached Jesus to Jewish people, they laid down their lives to save Jewish people. So allow me just to get a few words in, okay? Just in fairness here.
Yes.
So just a few things that are really important to hear. The idea of reward and punishment, read Leviticus 26, read Deuteronomy 28, then read the books of the prophets. It's there over and over. I didn't put that in there. God put it in the Torah. Don't make that a Christian thing. But the fact is, Christians around the world love God because He loved them. Because when they encountered His love and what Jesus did for them, all they could do is love back. And what's the reward that they're suffering now at the hands of radical Muslims around the world? They're getting slaughtered. In India right now, there's a movement to make it a Hindu nation. My best friend, one of my best friends in the world, my best friend in India, 3 of his young men have been martyred for the faith. I washed the feet of martyrs' widows in India. One of the young men from our ministry school, martyred by Al-Qaeda a few years ago. And what did his family do? What did the other team do? The other team went right back and kept preaching the gospel and serving poor Muslims. That we're going to respond with love back. But here's the path that I want you to consider, Shmuley. I've been, as I said, overseas and out of the United States over 200 times, all right? I've been to India 26 straight years. It's just one place. I've been in jungles in India. I've been in outlying places in Africa. I've been in from Juarez, Mexico to, I mean, you name it, to Seoul, Korea, and been overwhelmed by Christian love for the Jewish people. It's because they rightly understand the New Testament. And here's what we agree on. If we come to this right interpretation, and remember, Jesus is not coming back to Jerusalem according to the New Testament until the Jewish people welcome him, all right? And according to Romans 11, that the great culmination of the age is what? Nations turning to the God of Israel and Israel turning back to God. So the promises remain. But Shmuley, I would love to see, I can't tell you how many times I've thought of this. In India, in these other countries, if I had you with me, okay, they know me, they pray for me. If I'm doing a debate, they're praying that God would use me in the debate to reach the rabbis and all this. Okay, if you came with me, you would experience the greatest treatment of your entire life. You would be embarrassed by how much they loved you. And no one is going to, they differ with you, they pray for you privately, but they would respect you, they would honor you. They would consider it one of their greatest honors that you set foot in one of their houses. And I mentioned this in a previous debate, my closing remark here, okay? I just want a little equal time. Come on, just slight equal time.
You see, Mike is Jewish after all.
All right. So I mentioned this in one of our debates, 2004, I think. My first trip to India in '93, we get to a guy's house. His wife had not slept all night. She was so excited because Jews were coming to her home. And the husband meets me at the door. He said, "You are the second Jew to come into my house. The first was Jesus Christ." That's the message. That's the message.
Our first question is to Rabbi Boteach. The question is, would you respond to Romans 9, 10, and 11, which clearly say that God did not replace the Jewish people, nor is he done with them, and that is in the New Testament?
Well, I stated in my presentation, and it's the mainstay of my book, Kosher Jesus, available at fine bookstores everywhere. And yes, Mike wrote Real Kosher Jesus, and I wrote Really, Really, Really Kosher Jesus.
And I'm working on Glot Kosher Jesus.
Kosher, twice the price, half the taste. That was just a joke. I state in Kosher Jesus that at times there's a mixed message in the New Testament where, I quoted before, Jesus is approached by a Canaanite woman to expel a demon, and he says, "I'm not going to take the bread of the children and cast it to the dogs." And he also says, "Go only to the lost sheep of Israel." So there are aspects of the New Testament where Jesus is focused exclusively on Jews. Let us remember that Jesus was a Jew who never left the Holy Land in his entire life. The mission to the Gentiles was brought about by Paul. But for every verse where Paul will say that the Jews have not been rejected, Paul seems to have a real problem with the Jews. And it's specifically in the writings of Paul that there seems to be a very strong assault on the Jews. Now, I don't expect my Christian brothers and sisters to agree with the theory in Kosher Jesus, which I state at the beginning is largely based on the scholarship of Chaim Maccabee, and I know that Mike is very familiar with the scholarship of Chaim Maccabee. But Chaim Maccabee was a scholar who sifted through the New Testament to try and show where were additions made, where were there interpolations made, especially where there are direct contradictions. I gave you an example before where the book of Acts says that the Jews are trying to kill Jesus in Damascus. And yet Paul tells the exact same story in Corinthians, and it was King Aretas who was an ally of Rome in Damascus. Clearly that was changed. I mean, unless Mike can explain it to me in a way that you and all of us, that I and all of you can understand, it's a clear interpolation that was designed to demonize the Jews. So, and of course, Paul goes through many different stages. First, he says that he's persecuting Christians. Then Jesus appears to him on the road to Damascus, and now he decides to become a Christian, or whatever it would have been called in that time. And then he says he's going to try to keep the law. And then he says the law is obsolete. And he bases his dismissal of the law, and what I see is a clear mistranslation of a verse in Deuteronomy where it says that that it is a curse unto God to leave someone hanging on a tree. And it's talking about someone who incurs the death penalty, and they're put up on a tree as a symbol to everyone about what happens. And kilas ilakim toloi, it's a curse to God. That's a clear reference to someone. And why is it a curse to God for a corpse to be hanging on a tree? It's simple. Because man is created in the image of God. So God said, even if you have to use this corpse as an example to others not to violate the law, don't leave the body to be eaten by carrion and by vultures. Take it down. Paul says that the verse means that anyone who hangs on a tree, which he refers to the tree of the Torah, is now cursed. It's a clear mistranslation, which is why Maccabee believed that Paul could not read Hebrew, that he only read the Torah in the Septuagint, in the Greek translation. Because every time Paul quotes the Hebrew Bible, he always quotes even the mistakes in the Septuagint, and there are mistakes. So the point I'm making in this, I'm sorry, somewhat lengthy response, is that I find it difficult sometimes to even discern the full theology of Paul. Paul is even asked by the fathers of the church to pretend that he's actually keeping the law, so as not to be dismissed by those who were keeping the law. And then, of course, he famously says, I become all things to all men. To those under the law, I come as one under the law. To those who are outside the law, I come outside. I am all things to all men so that I might save some. So, yes, he does say that, but it seems contradicted by so much else of what he says.
Okay. Yeah, so just very quickly, because the question was designated for Shmuley. Number one, there's no question that Christians have read Paul or other portions of the New Testament or portions of the Tanakh to say that God is finished with the Jewish people. That has been a misreading of the text that we call replacement theology that we utterly repudiate. And in my book, Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, the new edition coming out in September, it's been in print. This should mean something to you, Shmuley. It's been in print continuously since 1992. That's how much interest there is in the church. Now we're putting out a brand new expanded edition. Oh, and by the way, Real Kosher Jesus has more reviews on Amazon than Kosher Jesus, but that's just an aside. But anyway, just an aside. Okay, but there are misinterpretations of Paul, and Peter in 2 Peter 3 says that sometimes it's hard to understand what he's saying. But rather than use the approach of Shmuley and other critical scholars and think that Paul's contradicting himself from page to page, it's better to say, let's dig deeper. I can give you examples, by the way, where it's clear he's quoting from Hebrew and correcting the Septuagint or differing from it. The German New Testament scholar Martin Hengel said we can actually see corrections in the Septuagint from Paul because of his knowledge of the Hebrew. And any alleged contradictions, I can give you very simple. Look, you know the critical scholars that find contradictions all over the Torah and find multiple authors. So what we need to do is look at the really clear passages, like the passages that say the covenant promises still remain with the Jewish people. And no matter how much they oppose the gospel, they're loved on account of the fathers. And that the Messiah confirms the promises rather than cancels them. So that was Romans 9, Romans 11, Romans 15. All right, and there'll be a turning of the Jewish people at the end of the age to embrace the Messiah. Like the prophet Jeremiah said that God would be the God of all the families of Israel. So we repudiate replacement theology. Without a doubt, replacement theology has opened the door to anti-Semitism in the church for centuries. And wherever it raises its head today, we need to cut it down and say that's not what Paul said, that's not what Jesus said.
Okay.
Wait, Mike, so does this mean, I'm so sorry, does this mean that you reject supersessionist replacement theology?
Oh, yeah, heart and soul, to the core, right. To the core. Let me repeat. Although there are Christians today who are not anti-Semites, who are supersessionists or hold to replacement theology, without question, historically, that theology opened the door for the brutal persecution of our people by professing Christians. And it is dangerous and it is unbiblical.
Okay, let me break in. We've gone 10 minutes on one question.
That's
was a good 10 minutes, though.
Would you all like to come back tomorrow?
That means that's the shortest answer I've ever given on any question I was ever asked. That's incredible.
Well, that's my next point. Let's keep the answers just a little bit shorter, please. And Mike, you don't get a question. It's back to Shmuley, just because of taking that time.
Well, he took 8 minutes, I took 2.
I don't want to be accused of being biased.
Oh, I'm not accusing you. You are being. That's fine. All right, he needs the extra help. No problem.
I don't have as many reviews as you.
He's got a fragile ego. I know that. I know it, so we'll give him the extra help. I won't mention the height differential. I won't say anything.
Shmuley, do you accept that the authors of the New Testament were Jews in an ethnic sense, practicing a sect of Second Temple Judaism? If not, who were the authors, and what is it based upon?
You want this, you know, Greg, you told me to make this very simple and short, so maybe.
Okay.
No, I mean, Mike knows the scholarship as well as any. Mark and Matthew seem to be much more Jewish books. Luke less so. John almost not at all. Paul is a mystery to me. And I'm sure Mike understands that the Jewish community till today has a very mixed feelings towards Paul.
Sure.
You know, on the one hand, I see in Paul, as a Jew, and let me be clear, my Judaism defines me to my very DNA, to a molecular level. And it's just who I am. I'm not better than anyone. I'm a Jew, and that's who I am. So, I on the one hand, I look at Paul, but I'm a Jew who, you know, speaks to a lot of non-Jews. And on the one hand, I look at Paul and I say, why didn't the Jewish people do what Paul did before Paul did it? Paul clearly saw something essential in Judaism that was very attractive. And the way many in the Jewish community see it, he stripped it of its more cumbersome observances, and he made it the most successful idea in the history of the world. Why didn't the Jews understand that they had a certain internationalism, a certain globalism to their faith? That the whole world wanted to learn about God, that the whole world wanted to learn about the Ten Commandments, that the whole world wanted to learn about ethical monotheism. Why did it take Paul to spread this? And this is something that the Jewish community has grappled with till this very day. Till today, we remain an insular community. Christianity is a much more global community. I'm not only talking about numbers, because there's only 6 million Tibetan Buddhists, but the Dalai Lama feels that he has a message for the whole world, and his books sell to people who are not Buddhists throughout the world. But we in the Orthodox community certainly are insular, and we don't spread our message. And sometimes we get criticized for spreading the message. So on the one hand, Paul really intrigues me. He saw something very special in Judaism. On the other hand, I don't understand why he felt the need to kind of assault the Jewish people so much in order to get that message out. You just said, Mike, that you reject supersessionist replacement theology. Why couldn't Paul have taken that approach? Look, leave Judaism as it is. Let the Jews keep it. But there's essential truths here that should be shared throughout the world with people who don't want to practice circumcision, with people who don't want to keep kosher food. So, you know, I have a mixed relationship with him. And of course, he was an incredible writer. Love is patient, love is kind. You're talking about eloquence that is just searing. On the other hand, when I see what he writes about my people, I get very troubled.
So I think the perspective we need to have when we think about Paul, and by the way, in Acts 21, he wasn't asked to fake it and pretend that he was living as a Jew. He was asked to show what he was doing because of the rumors that he was telling Jews to stop keeping the customs of the people. He was living as a Jew himself. When he said it to the Jews, I become a Jew, meaning I take on certain traditions and things I don't have to. He said, but with the Gentiles, I'm not under the same traditions, but I'm still under Messiah's law. But here's the thing. Two quick points. One, remember the moment. This is not 2,000 years later. This is the belief that the Messiah has come, that he's died for our sins and rose from the dead. This is the pivotal moment in our history. What are we going to do with it? This is the big thing we've been waiting for through the ages. So there's this life and death. Will we believe, will we not believe? It's not like 2,000 years later, Judaism is doing fine, Christianity is doing fine. Why do they have to intersect like that? But the other point is this. It's because he believed that Jesus was the Messiah of Israel, that Jews could continue to live as Jews and follow him, but not subject to necessarily all the traditions, some of which they felt were contrary to God's plan and God's heart. Just like you have Reform and Conservative and Orthodox, Modern Orthodox and Ultra-Orthodox, different expressions. The same with Messianic Jews today. But his understanding was because Jesus is the Messiah of Israel, therefore he's the Savior of the world. and that's why we have to go tell everyone. But like in Acts 13, that you quoted, when he says, I'm going to the Gentiles, what does he do to the next city? He starts with the Jews, because he said the gospel is to the Jew first. So in his mind, this is the Jewish message for the Jewish people, and he's being misunderstood as the author of replacement theology. It's a pitched battle we fight all the time. But I deeply appreciate your honesty in terms of Paul, and just keep reading him.
I bet you're next going to tell me that Paul has a lot more reviews than I do. And
No, let me clarify, because that was not a put down. Shmuley's kosher sex book has way more reviews than my commentary on Jeremiah. Way more. So it was not a put down. It was just observation. Casual.
Well, my daughter Chana is here. She lives in Israel. My son Mendy is here. He lives in Israel. And I want to thank Mendy for all the help he gave me in preparing for this debate, because I told Mendy that I want to make sure that I God forbid, never wish to offend my Christian brothers and sisters. I wanted to make my points in a way that preserved the integrity of my people, but reached out lovingly to my Christian brothers and sisters. But my daughter Chana just started the world's first kosher sex store in Tel Aviv. And the idea is that religious people really have to have a new approach to human intimacy and to marriage. And we have to strengthen and bolster marriage and respect for women. Sexuality is so broken in our time. We just see the Me Too movement and the abuse and the disrespect. And I actually think this is an area where Jews and Christians could really collaborate to restore sanctity to marriage, sexuality.
So I am 100% for what Shmuley just said, but I'm making a public announcement, the first time this has ever been heard by human ears. I am not writing the book Real Kosher Sex. Just to let you know, I am not writing that book. You have your classic, it's out. You said it.
But you are writing Kosher Sex. Really?
All right, gentlemen, I have one question that will be the last question, I'm sure. But hopefully we'll end on a very positive note from this question. The seemingly uncrossable chasm between Jewish people and Christians has grown wider because of a false understanding about God's plan and purpose for Jewish people, exacerbated by certain statements in the New Testament. How can we bridge the gulf?
Okay, I'll go first. Here's where we agree. And I want you to know, yes, it's important for me to have this debate with the hope that Jewish people will look at the New Testament afresh and consider who Jesus is afresh. However, Rabbi Shmuley and I had a joint goal in a deeper way than any debate we've ever had, which is that as one, we would completely denounce the vile ugliness of anti-Semitism, and that we would do it as something that is utterly contrary to being a true Christian or a true follower of Jesus. We share that goal. In fact, at the end, we'll probably hug, so get your cameras out, photo op, right? Okay, but here's how we arrive at the same conclusions. For Rabbi Shmuley, it's a matter of rewriting parts of the New Testament, excising certain parts. This has been wrongly edited. But as long as our interpretation of the text is one that comes out in a way that is not supersessionist and not Jew-hating, where the whole of the people are demonized as Christ killers, etc., then I think you're happy with that outcome. So if you're a follower of Jesus, what's his ethic? Does he curse those who curse him, or does he bless them? He lays down his life for his enemies. Paul says, if your enemy's hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. He says, overcome evil with good. That's the way Christians are supposed to live. That's why through history, they've often been persecuted, but then in the wrong setting, they become the persecutors. So as a follower of Jesus, as a Jewish follower of Jesus, I say that anybody that hates the Jews, that demonizes the Jews, that demonizes Israel as a nation as a whole, and does it in the name of Jesus, is blaspheming and denying the name of Jesus and making a mockery of the New Testament faith.
I've never believed that relationships, friendships should be based on fraudulence. And that's why Mike and I always have real debates. Kumbaya, where you just ignore or overlook essential differences, that's not real. And what you saw tonight is a real debate. and all the debates that we've had have been real debates. They've always been heated and passionate, but they've never been personal. And they've never been personal because I know that Mike Brown is a good man. And I've seen him with his family, and I know he's a good man. I know he's always been respectful to me, and I've tried to reciprocate, and he's a good man. We have essential, critical differences in theology, but we have a shared goal. And there can be no question that in our time, that shared goal is that Jews and Christians must join together to combat a new wave of anti-Semitism, which murders Jews in Israel, as it did yesterday, where a yeshiva student was murdered. It murders Jews in synagogues, as it did in Pittsburgh or in Poway, California. It demonizes and delegitimizes the state of Israel, saying that Israel has no right to exist. The new anti-Semitic coinage of our time is the word occupier. And it essentially says that the Jews have no home, that you Jews are parasites. And it's exactly what the Nazis said about the Jews. Hitler's main argument against the Jews is that they're leeches, they're bloodsuckers, that they live off the fat of the German land, contributing nothing, taking everything, and therefore they should be exterminated. We've heard Louis Farrakhan call Jews termites in the past year. We've heard Congressman Ilhan Omar say that Jews deploy their resources to bribe and own elected officials to kind of take over the world, which is what it says in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. We've heard Rashida Tlaib say that the Jews have dual loyalties, as if we're not real Americans. Same idea, right? Always the same idea. You're not really American. You're not really even Jewish because the land is not yours, you're occupiers. You're not European, you're not German. You don't belong here. And we've heard that throughout our existence. And I can say, and I have said, and I will repeat and say, that the foremost allies of the state of Israel today are our Christian brothers and sisters who have risen to the occasion to fight for Israel politically, to stand with the Jewish people against this new assault of BDS. And it's something, don't believe for one moment that the Jewish community is not immensely grateful or that we overlook it. It doesn't mean that we will overlook it. It doesn't mean that we will overlook it to the point of ignoring essential theological differences or distinctions. That's a fraudulent relationship. No one would want that. It does mean that amidst those differences, there's a deep love and bond that connects us. And I honestly wrote Kosher Jesus, as I said at the beginning of the book in the introduction. I said, I knew I would take flack from the Jewish community. To be honest, I didn't realize how much I would take. It was a very difficult year when it came out, 2011, for me and my family. Very difficult. I think, Mike, you followed it. Even you were probably surprised by the ferocity of the attacks on me. I was spending almost every day responding to vicious, vicious attacks. But I honestly wrote the book because I felt that even as we Jews understand Jesus in a completely different light to how our Christian brothers and sisters do, we reject the deity of Jesus, the divinity of Jesus, we reject the messiahship of Jesus. But I saw Jesus as a patriot who fought the Romans because of how brutal they were to his people. And that there are many fragments in the New Testament that express that love and that connection and that devotion. And I wanted to develop that. So, in conclusion, I want to acknowledge that this is a new era for Jews and Christians. It's a new era based on a common idea. And it's very flattering. The idea being that Christians say that believe and affirm that the Jews are God's chosen people who were given a biblical claim to the land of Israel and that they deserve to live in peace in that land.
Thank you.
And I finally want to tell Mike directly and specifically that you and I have now known each other for almost 20 years, and we've shared many stages together. But it's been a bunch of years that we haven't. I want to tell you how much I enjoyed this evening. I think that discussing substantive ideas is exactly what the world needs. I think we end up speaking about so much garbage in today's culture and society. Whether it's dumb movies, I like going to movies, but to sit and talk about them for hours. The presidential debates and the stuff that we see in the political arena can be really petty, and the news cycle changes almost every day, so that you know it's kind of transient. But the subjects that we're discussing, even if it's heated, they're eternal. They're actually really important. They cut to the core of our belief system and our convictions and our values, and that's why it matters that you came out tonight. You might disagree with me completely, and as I said before, you have the right to be wrong. I respect that, but don't believe for one moment that I take it for granted that you all come and listen and give up a beautiful New York evening where you could be in the park or doing something nice or going to a movie and instead hearing a strong debate. And Mike, I thank you for being my debate partner. I'm always impressed that in our debates you never get riled up, you never take offense, you stay very focused on the issues. That says a lot about your being a scholar who really cares about the material. And it makes no difference that we disagree. What does make a difference is that we are two fellow Jews, we are two fellow Americans, and we are two people to whom faith is the center of our lives, and we want to make the world, God willing, a godlier place and a better place.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Let's thank our speakers.